Well, a very warm welcome and good afternoon to the PitchMark IP Clinic today, focusing on the film and television industry. I'm Mark Lowdy here in Singapore, and today we're going to be covering, in the next 20 minutes, we'll be covering the changing nature of the film and TV industry and what it means for you as an innovator. A lot of things have changed over the years. Many more independent contractors are involved in the industry. There's a great deal more that needs to be said in relation to distribution rights, not just production rights. And because there are so many channels, that also impacts your rights as an IP producer. So we're going to be focusing on these and other topics in the next 20 minutes and beyond. And on that score, can I also invite you to be part of the show today? You can see the QR code here on screen. Please take that snapshot of the QR code now. Or enter the Menti code that's also appearing here on the screen into your browser. Now, to get started on our conversation, and while you answer the first question that is appearing here, I'm pleased to be joined by two guests who really bring an incredible amount of experience and depth to the discussion of the film and TV industry and what you as an innovator need to know. Just turning on his camera is our very own Frank Rittman, legal advisor at PitchMark, who's also been involved for many years in pursuing copyright claims on the behalf of the Motion Picture Association. Frank was the guy that governments and clandestine broadcasters of content used to fear. He used to be the one who went around and demanded license fees from people who publicly displayed movies in places that they shouldn't have, or at least not without compensation. Frank Rittman, good afternoon to you in Bangkok.
Thanks, Mike.
And we also have with us from Hong Kong, a Singaporean lawyer who's been deeply involved in the film and television industry here, serving in many areas of the film industry and also getting his hands dirty on some production work himself. Michael Leow at Haldanes in Hong Kong. Thank you also for joining us today.
Thank you, Mark.
Firstly, Michael, would you introduce yourself a little bit more and tell us what angle you're coming in on this issue of IP in the film and television industry?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm Singaporean, but I've lived in Hong Kong for over 20 years. And essentially, my practice is corporate commercial with a focus on entertainment and media, and a sub-focus on film and TV. So originally my work covers a kind of a variety of areas. I started off doing sales agency, distribution work, and then went on to co-productions, productions, investments. And I think recently, due to COVID and because of the proliferation of content demand, been looking a lot at development agreements, development arrangements, acquisition of rights in of whether production companies or streamers or studios acquiring rights to remake or to make TV series or films. Co-investments in productions as well. So there's been an array of things happening recently.
No wonder you're described as one of Asia's most preeminent entertainment lawyers. And it's been very good to have you agree to be on the show today. And another reminder for you, if you've just joined us, to please scan the QR code. You can use Mentimeter, firstly, to tell us a little bit more about why you've joined our webinar today, and also to ask your questions at any time. You can also use the chat function here in Zoom to pop your questions to our special guests. Michael, firstly, paint the picture for us a little as to how things have changed, certainly in the 20 years that you've been in Hong Kong, but also during your time with the Infocom Media Development Authority in Singapore and the role that you played there. What's the latest state of play? What must you know as an innovator?
I guess you just need to be in touch with what's going on in the industry, because there's so much changes going on, especially now with with all the streamers coming in now into the business, and people are consuming content in a very different way as opposed to just going to theaters and cinemas. Everyone's doing on the mobile and TV at home. So that's one area that we need to look at. There's also, like I said earlier, because of the demand for content, people are acquiring more rights, IP rights, and so there's a need to be aware of what those rights that you have and how to exploit them, and how not to be exploited by somebody who's going to be acquiring those rights from you.
Okay, so let's start in that first element then of what the source of a lot of this content is. As an innovator, as a writer, perhaps a script writer, maybe a designer of some sort, you might have previously been employed by a production company, but that's not necessarily the case anymore, is it?
No, I mean, I think it's. I mean, there are people who have been employed and there are people who are not employed. So, and I think increasingly there are more independent producers, independent creators who are coming out on their own and making a break for themselves. And in that sense, they have a little bit more bargaining power, or maybe not, depending on where you sit. In terms of, I mean, you have a bargaining power if you have a, for example, if you have an IP which is very popular and somebody wants it, and in that sense, you can sort of dictate your bargaining terms, the terms of your deal, to a certain extent, of course. So I think that's all changing as well, and also I think people are getting a bit more savvy with contracts, savvy with terms, and so I think that's all coming into play now.
Okay, so in other words, if you're an independent creator or a freelancer, which obviously is one of those growing trends, you're saying that you've actually got more leeway than if you create ideas for as an employee of a production company, where whatever you produce is anyway part of their IP portfolio.
I mean, I think you have leeway in terms of your creative freedom, I suppose, in independent creators. As opposed to working for somebody who tells you exactly what you need to do, right? So I mean, I think it's being an independent can be quite exciting as well, because it gives you an opportunity to explore things that you wouldn't ordinarily would be able to do if you were with a company.
Okay, and for you watching, once again, please go to Mentimeter and now complete the question that's being asked on the screen. In essence, we're looking to hear from you as to what aspect of IP in film and television interests you the most. Perhaps you work in this field, maybe you are gainfully employed, maybe you're running a production company, or you are a freelancer. Just let us know a little bit about where you're coming from on this by going to Mentimeter, menti.com, 3521-505. Michael, obviously the other big change that we've seen in recent years is that the distributors themselves are producing content. And of course, I'm thinking here of the likes of Netflix, Amazon, HBO. How has that improved or worked to the detriment of freelancers and other independent creators?
I think it's opened up more opportunities for them. I think before we had Netflix or Amazon coming into the market, I think there were a lot of independent filmmakers who were kind of struggling to get their films made because they had to fit in with the studio systems. But now with these SVODs coming on the market, there is a demand for more content and therefore local content as well. And therefore, we see Netflix is going out to, or reaching out to the local directors and producers who were struggling before, but are now the flavor of the month. And so they've been engaged to create content for Netflix or Amazon for the local channel.
So more opportunity, but because they have such market power, doesn't that also mean that they're not likely to give you very generous terms when you come along with your script or your designs or whatever your innovation?
Well, yes and no. I think again, I think it depends on what you have to offer. I mean, if you have an IP which is fairly popular in the market, and you hold it, so you sort of have that bargaining chip which you can use to get better terms. Yeah. So I think it depends really.
Depends on who you are and how much you produce.
Yeah.
Okay, and Frank, come on in on this, because obviously the monetization aspect is something that everybody is interested in. Of course, we're all creatives, creators, but at the end of the day, the buck stops when the buck stops. So how have these two trends that we've discussed so far, the move to independence and the industry producers, changed things?
Yeah, to your first point, I mean, the sea change over the past 20 years, I would think, is really digital technology that's just facilitated a much enhanced scope of production and distribution of content. But we've also seen a real simultaneous growth in mobile connectivity. So the fact that you don't have to physically sit in front of a television set anymore or a fixed device, and you could be out your field out in Africa or in India and be, consuming content. I think those are really the sea changes that have facilitated these new market entrants that Michael mentioned, the likes of Netflix and Amazon. To the point about the change between the old glory days of the Hollywood studio system, where you had directors and producers and actors and writers literally on staff in offices on your lot. You're right, the trend these days is more towards freelancing and independent productions. But I think that really is a function of studios these days are just more competitive and they're trying to save costs, and those grand glory days are over. Even though in theory, freelancers would engender a more negotiable process, there still is something in the film industry and to a large extent in the entertainment industry called clout and leverage. And to your point, yeah, there are very few people who get to name their own terms. I suppose if you're Marty Scorsese or you're John Williams or you're Christopher Nolan, you can perhaps dictate the terms to the studios on which you'll allow your contributions to be captured. But for the vast majority of people, there isn't really too much negotiation process. We can get into that a little bit, but clout and leverage have been the hallmark of Hollywood since it began.
Okay. Michael, before I take the questions here on the screen, and once again, a reminder to you watching, please add your comments here via Menti, the code at the top of the screen. Michael, when you think of your clients, what sort of clients are they usually now? Who comes to you and says, Michael, I need some help negotiating a contract? Take us through the usual steps that you're seeing.
Well, I do a lot of work for independent producers, actually. We've done some work for studios as well, but more for the independents or production companies who are looking for help in dealing with the studios or with the mini studios. And so so to give you an example, let's see, I'm working on a development deal with one of the streamers, against one of the streamers, actually. So they've come to me to help structure their development deal with the streamer, who will actually be acquiring the rights from them to remake a TV series based on a book. So what I usually do is I help them look at the term sheet, advise them on what the rights, the scope of rights that they should be granting or they want to reserve for themselves. And if there are also things like this kind of deal, sometimes the streamers or the studios would acquire the rights, but sometimes they'll just sit on it and do nothing. So what we want to make sure that we have a reversion as well on that. So so things like that. Rights, reversions. Sometimes we talk about the money. Again, it depends on the bargaining position of the producer. And what is out in the market for these kind of rights, for these kind of deals. Yeah.
Okay. So, in fact, on the subject of reversions, one of our viewers, thank you for contributing this one. And you can read it here in the green box. Michael, I assume you can see it for yourself.
I can, but let me just.
Point or deal killer, it says. For me, as a literary agent, it was reversions, so that no matter what, at some point, I get the rights back. So what's your view in terms of sticking points or deal killers?
Wait, sorry, this is from, this is a literary agent, right?
I think, yes, I think you were a literary agent. You who wrote this one?
It's a greatest sticking point.
At some point you
Yeah,
want
correct.
Thank you, Fran.
Oh, okay. So
I was writing it just as you were talking about it.
Right.
So that was, it was quite.
so I can't actually see the whole question because there's some of these things were blocking me on the right.
Oh.
I'll read it again. What
is the sort of sticking point today? I mean, I think it probably changes as technology changes and as things start to become big. Like you would never assume that you're doing a deal and you have to reserve like theme park rights, but you do.
Yeah, I mean, I guess okay, what I'm seeing these days, I mean, in the past, if you're doing it with a deal with a studio, they would buy all rights regardless of whether they exploit it or not. But I'm seeing a lot of deals now, at least in Asia, there are a lot of carve-outs, right? So to give you an example, like if one of the streamers was looking to make a TV series on a book, then we try to negotiate just for the TV series rights and keep everything else. But they might have perhaps a right of first refusal on a feature film rights, if a feature film is going to be made based on the book. Would they take theme park rights? Probably not, because they're never going to do a theme park. So
well, they're never going to do it, but they would like to be the ones that sell it.
Yeah, true. They do, but I'm seeing some of the deals where they do give those up.
I'm just using that. I'm not really serious about that.
Yeah. So
I mean,
my
before
point
Harry Potter, you wouldn't have really thought about it.
No, you wouldn't. No, but I think my point is there are opportunities where you can do a carve out, and I've seen that in Europe especially, the French love to carve out rights.
Right. Well, that's cool. Fran, thank you for jumping in both verbally and in writing here. Here's another one, Michael, for you. It used to be that the dream for an author was book to movie to TV. Thank you for submitting this one. And your question now, what is ideal?
Now, what is ideal? Now it's TV. I mean, I'm seeing more like series, You
still need to start with the book, get to the movie before the TV serial.
Oh, I mean, well, yeah. I mean, I guess, well, no, not necessarily. You could start with an idea, a concept, right? And if somebody likes that concept, they'll hire you to write the scripts for the series or the movie. It doesn't necessarily have to be a book.
Okay, still that's quite risky though, right? To be sending a concept along, the studio says thanks, but no thanks, and then they get their own script writer to do it.
Well, I mean, when you're talking about a book, you're talking about a novel, right? We publish a novel, but some people wouldn't necessarily do that. I mean, some producers have come up with literally some concepts and maybe a synopsis, for example, a treatment of a concept, and they pitch that to a producer, and if they think that that's something that's worth producing into a film or TV, then it could be picked up.
Really? Wow. But we've also had one of you here on the call. You say that script writing is what interests you most. So if you have such a script, how much do you need to have fleshed it out in order to go to the studio and say, look, don't rip off this idea because actually I've already, gone beyond the conceptual stage?
Well, some would not. Well, some people might flesh out the script. That means they spend their own time and money to do it. Or some people might do like I said earlier, a synopsis or treatment. And based on that, if it's picked up, then the studios would fund their development and pay them to write the scripts or get a writer to write the script based on that concept.
with presumably some sort of commercial contractual obligations already in place.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And how long does the synopsis need to be? Are we talking about a couple of pages, 10 pages?
It could be a one pager. It could be 5 pages. It could be 10 pages. It depends.
It could be, Mark, but I would say the rule of thumb, certainly from a copyright perspective, is the more detailed, the better.
No.
Because copyright as an element doesn't protect underlying concepts or ideas. It protects the expression of those ideas.
Yeah.
So to Michael's point, if somebody did just put in a one pager, if you will, it might be that those concepts are more easily taken and developed and adapted. Whereas if you set your love story in a particular century or a particular planet, and you describe in some notion the characters, it's more likely that they'll be protected and those identical things won't be, seen and taken by somebody else. You could PitchMark that script though before you send it in as well.
Absolutely essential, I would say, that you do that. Michael, one of our viewers says that they're not so sure a synopsis or treatment would be read. Under what circumstances, or how do you need to pitch it to them so that they sit up, take notice, and they do read the synopsis or treatment?
Well, okay, I wouldn't recommend cold calling, right? I think it would really have to be a lot of, I agree, studios won't just pick up a treatment of any Tom, Dick, and Harry. If it's somebody that who has track record, who's well known to have done award-winning films and TV, they might look at a synopsis. Yes, I agree. They might look at a treatment because they know that this person has shown to be able to produce something and has substance, so to speak. But if you're new and if you're just up and if you're just a new kid on the block, I agree. Writing a synopsis wouldn't really help you to get anywhere with the studio.
Okay, so ideally make a name for yourself, or as one other viewer of ours here today suggests, you certainly would need to send it through an agent or another member of the PitchMark Global League.
Generally speaking, I would agree. When you get to the level of like Hollywood or something, it's a smaller town than you think. And for a variety of reasons, the studios would be particularly reluctant to take, as Michael described it, a cold call or an unsolicited manuscript for a whole bunch of reasons. But there's a small community of people who get to know one another, and there's generally an understanding of who's looking for what. Or when a property emerges, who the agent would typically know who's best to try to sell it or pitch it to. You're quite right, though. Unsolicited manuscripts coming in, dear producer, take a look. Yeah. I think that's probably unrealistic these day and age.
Also, I think this thing about lawyers getting involved. I think it happens only in the U.S. perhaps because a lot of lawyers in the U.S. also want to be producers as well. I maybe some of them are in Asia as well, but
how do you do it in Asia? Sorry? How do you do it in Asia? Do you just?
Well, I mean, in Asia, I guess it's going. You probably have to be going to film festivals, film markets to meet people, get yourself known out there, get yourself talking with other scriptwriters, talking with other producers, basically being really social about it, and hoping that an opportunity comes up where you can present your ideas to the right person. It's all connections. It's all relationships.
Well, I think the trend that's going on in the States amongst lawyers these days is some are veering away towards just the traditional hourly fee that they would charge a lawyer for their expertise, and they're trying to get a percentage of the commercialization of the property itself.
Right.
Whereas in the former days you're supposed to be zealously representing your client's interests. So to me, I've always just charged people by the hour for what I do for them. I think when you say, look, I'll do all the legal work for you, but I want 1% or 0.5% or 2% or whatever, you may get into a conflict of interest situation where the lines get blended and your interests becomes simultaneously distinguished from your clients.
Yeah. Okay, 2 more questions from this particular chart before we have another question for you in relation to Top Gun Maverick. But first, we've seen a great proliferation over the years of Marvel comics being adapted to film. And so one of you here on the call has asked about this independent comics adapted to film or TV. That's of interest. But what about not just Marvel comics or independent comics? Michael, what about this one? Original IP, rather than adapt from a comic. Is there more desire from streaming services to find original productions?
I would say yes, probably. I wouldn't know offhand, to be honest, but original IP. Yeah, I think as long as the IP makes sense for the streamers to produce, and in the sense that it would meet the demands of the viewers. Yes, definitely. I mean, yeah.
So for you as legal counsel advising some of these creatives heading off to the streamers, and you related an example of that a little bit earlier on in this IP clinic by PitchMark, what happens there? I mean, do they already have a comic independently published perhaps, or do they have a script which is brand new, is completely original?
It could be both in those situations. I mean, I'll give you an example which I worked on. But this was a famous comic book, and that was picked up to be made into an animation series. And that was because the reason why it was picked up was because it had a very big following. It was very popular in the country where it's from. It made, in the sense that it made a lot of money. It sold a lot of books. It sold a lot of comic books, and it was a very beloved kind of IP for people in that country. And so they made an animation based on that for the local content consumption in that country. So
it helps to have something that's published already popular. The studio has some certainty.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think it helps, definitely. But I wouldn't rule out the fact that if you have an original IP which is potentially something that would make a lot of money, and it's valuable, that Netflix or Amazon wouldn't pick it up. I wouldn't rule that out.
Awesome. Well, that then brings us to
because I think the reason why I'm saying all that is because I'm very optimistic. There's an opportunity there.
Okay. Well, let's tackle this last one here about the steps to negotiation. But just a gentle reminder: we're halfway through our IP clinic. Tessa, thank you for joining us. If you're among those joining us this afternoon, please take the Menti code that's there at the top of the screen. Keep those questions coming. And here's the other question that we'd like your take on. You may be aware of the current issue going on around Top Gun Maverick, $350-odd million movie that Paramount has had a great deal of success with. If you go to the Menti code on the screen, you can get this article by IndieWire, which explains what the current copyright issue is over the movie. In essence, Ehud Yoneh, who wrote the original article back in 1983 called Top Guns, his family is claiming copyright ownership of Top Gun Maverick because it was, because they say that they still have ownership of the copyright over this franchise. So once again, when you go to menti.com on your phone, you key in the code 3521505, you will see the link to that article here on the screen. So does the family still have copyright claim? Vote by going to menti.com. So Michael, back to our question about negotiation steps. You've already said that in order to get your script taken up by a studio, you have to do what you have to do in every other industry: get to know people, meet people, press the flesh, and of course, post-COVID, we can do that again. What are the other negotiation steps is what one of our viewers would like to know.
Other negotiation steps of which stage? Of getting access to?
Yeah. What's next? Right. So maybe you've ching-chinged a glass of something with a producer at a networking function, perhaps a film fest. and then they say, sure, send me the transcript, or send me your treatment, or send me your comic, or whatever it is. What's next?
Well, I mean, I guess it's to follow up to make. I think, it's a delicate balance, right? I mean, you don't want to be too much of a stalker, because that would really turn the producers away, right? Unless, of course, your IP is such a winner that they have no choice but to entertain you. But if it's an IP which isn't really, which you think it's the top number one, but they may think it's something which they don't really want. Being a stalker could kind of ruin your chances for future potential deals that you might have. I would think that you'd have to be able to read the signs to know whether this is something that say one of the streamers would take it up or not. And if not, maybe leave it as that and come back for another try on something else.
But let's say there was some interest.
Okay.
What's the next step? Do you already go whole hog and send them the treatment, the synopsis, the comic, the script, or what do you do next?
I mean, I guess if they've got interest, they will probably want to see what else you've written. You can send them the script, and if they like what they see, I guess they'll do a contract with you.
And do you then, I mean, apart from pitch marking the script, do you need to go to a lawyer first, or at what point do you get activated?
You could go to a lawyer. I've seen situations where they would entertain, well, they would negotiate the initial commercial terms, and then come to us to have an advice on whether these terms would be reasonable or not. And then at some point we would come in to perhaps talk to the other side about the deal.
So you actively get involved in the price negotiations?
No, sometimes no. Actually, most of the time I don't. It's mostly done by the client and the producers themselves.
And you come in to make sure that the deal is watertight, and then they can't, as Fran was saying earlier, you can't just open a theme park without your permission.
So I come in to talk about the rights, to a certain extent about the price, but not really much. The rights, the obligations, and what else? I mean, I can't think of it. Yeah, I mean,
what's this document usually that you then come up with? Does it run into dozens of pages, hundreds of pages?
Okay, so basically, I think, and I'm talking about typical situation, it would probably be like an option purchase agreement. Generally, that means the producer will acquire an option to purchase the rights from you, the creator, to make a TV series based on the script, for example, right? And that would be maybe an 18 months option with a fee, an option fee that they pay. And at the end of 18 months, if they are going to go ahead with the production, or they're seriously going to go ahead with making the film, then they would pay a purchase price.
Okay. Well, we have a question that's come in here on Menti. Thank you for submitting this one. You've asked, if I option a book that is the biography of an actual person, let's say that person is deceased, is getting the book rights from the author or publisher sufficient? So biography implies that it's written by a third party. That person.
Yeah, it depends if there is a publisher, right? I mean, I'm assuming if there is a publisher, yes, you'd have to go to the publisher, because the author would have assigned its rights over to the publisher to negotiate these kind of deals for the author.
Okay, especially if so if the author is still alive, but the actual person that that biography is about is deceased, actually, it doesn't matter whether the person who the biography about is deceased. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, even if the person is deceased, his estate could have a claim over the book. I mean, he could.
Yeah, it really might depend on the jurisdiction, Mark. There are things called right to publicity that go to the use of names and likenesses. And depending on the jurisdiction, sometimes those rights expire when the famous person dies. Sometimes they continue on, as Michael said, into the estate.
Okay, so but is there is in fact a difference between the person who's written the biography and the person the biography is about?
Yes.
But both would need to be consulted if you're going to turn that biography into a film.
Well, yes and no. If you're making the film based on the book that's being published, right? So then the question is, who owns that book, right? Then you would have to go to the owners of the book, because you're making the series, the film based on that book, even though it's a biography of that person.
So you need to talk to the publisher.
If the publisher owns the rights to make derivative works off the book.
Would you wake sleeping dogs by calling the family of the deceased person that the biography is about?
No, you wouldn't. That wouldn't be your first step. That you would. I mean, if you found a book that you want to make a film based out of, you would go straight to the publisher, and the publisher would then tell you whether they have the rights or not, and whether to go to the family directly.
Okay.
I jump in.
Sure.
Sorry, but you know, if this is going to be something, big budget, you probably will want to secure any rights that are out there to this person so that other people aren't going to do it. So if you can, I would think you would want to go to the family.
Yes, you could.
If you get life story rights from the family, then other people can't do it.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, yeah, I mean, that would be great. But sometimes the families,
right,
they would not be interested at all.
I think really you're both correct, and the studios don't want a lot of risk. The insurance companies don't want uncertainty, and the last thing in the world you want is for the estate or if the person's alive to come out of the woodwork and threaten to shut the whole thing down.
Yeah.
So
or to do a competing.
Right. At some point, the studio is almost going to definitely insist that you get a waiver from the person that you're writing about to ensure either their cooperation or that they won't come forward. And typically, yeah, you'd build that into the budget.
Cool. Okay. Cool. Thank you, Fran, for jumping in. I'm thrilled that you're getting so much value out of our call today. 20 minutes to the end of the show. I do want to remind you of our question here. Does the family of Ehud Yonah, the author of the original 1983 article Top Guns, still have a copyright claim over the Top Gun franchise? What do you think? Read the article on IndieWire. It's here on the screen, or you can click on it in the phone when you go to menti.com. 4 of you have already voted. We'll check out what your answers are in the next 20 minutes. We have one other question, though, here for you, Michael and Frank, and that's this one here. Is optioning common in Southeast Asia and Asia in general? Michael, you talked earlier about at least securing an option with the studio, even if they haven't yet agreed to fully purchase the film.
Yeah, it's very common. A lot of deals are based on options, because the reason why is a lot of purchasers wouldn't want to spend all that money in producing something or acquiring an IP which they may not necessarily be able to raise financing for, or be able to go the whole stretch in producing the film. So the whole point of an option is to give that 18 months, like I said earlier, that 18 months during which time they will then develop the IP into a feature film, meaning they would hire script writers to write the script of that feature film that they want to make, and also look at raising financing during that time for the feature film. And if all that falls through, then all they would have lost is the option fee. They wouldn't have paid the full purchase price for it. So that's really, in essence, why people do it as an option purchase.
And 18 months, is that usually the time frame?
It could be 8, yeah, could be 12, but I think usually it's 18, and then you have an extension, or maybe 12. And I mean, I've done a deal where we built in 6 extensions. So yeah, and I think, and luckily we did, because things just kind of were delayed throughout. So so we are now at the last extension. So that was probably 10 years ago, probably 12 years ago.
Goodness, it'll be a historical novel by the time it comes out. So what happens then in this case? Does the purchase price then actually decline on account of the fact that you obviously don't have any other options and you're hoping?
No, the purchase price is set, right? So then what happens is your first option fee will be applicable against the purchase price, but the extension fees will not be.
Okay, cool. So 15 minutes to go. My final call to you, please submit your questions to Menti. Once again, the code is there at the top of the screen, menti.com 3521505. Or you can do what Fran has been doing, and that is to just unmute and jump in on the conversation. Why don't you join us? So far, you've been listening silently. Why not join us here in this conversation with Michael Leow in Hong Kong and Frank Rittman in Bangkok. Couple of additional points, obviously, when it comes to then negotiating the contract, rather. We've talked about the rise of the independent creators. We've talked about the streamers being the producers and therefore rubbing shoulders with the right people so that you can get your script or concept in front of the right people. We've then talked about the importance of optioning. What are some of the other cutting edge things that you're seeing, Michael, that your clients are asking you about, whether it's DVD rights, for example, windowing, theatrical, home entertainment, TV rights, and that sort of thing?
Actually, no. Those issues haven't been coming up actually recently.
You might have expected them to, right? Because wasn't that previously when you and I were kids, wasn't that the thing that, that was just the logical sequence? It went to video.
Oh yeah. I mean, yes, but yeah, I mean, I think now theatrical is it's still important, of course, but it's minimized because of SVODs and home entertainment, or rather the ability to have to watch entertainment at home or on mobile devices. So the windows for theatrical are shorter. There's no DVD market as well. Yep. Well, certain countries they are. I think I was just talking to a distributor the other day, and she said, "Oh, we still in Hong Kong have DVDs, so it's the shop's still making them, manufacturing them, selling them." But I think the distribution media these days is really TV, is streaming, yep. Internet, yeah.
Are there any other new forms of distribution that you're increasingly seeing? Games, for example, distribution via Telegram. Who knows? What's the cutting?
I haven't seen. Well, I can imagine games would be one of them, but I haven't really been seeing that from what I'm doing. No, it's really just TV for now. I mean, from my side, yeah.
Should you be, because you lawyer folks all like to make things absolutely watertight, should you include that as an independent?
Oh yeah, there's always a fallback. There's always a fallback clause to cover everything, right? All media now known or hereafter created. That's the usual language that we create. So
that made Netflix billions of dollars. That few people know Netflix started out as a DVD delivery service. If you were too lazy to return your stuff to the store, you just put it in a mailbox and they do it for you. They buried a clause in there that basically entitled them to get streaming rights. The studios just were asleep, never noticed it. That's what enabled it. That's the value of a contract.
Awesome. For those of you who've been trying to vote on the Top Gun story, please try again. The question we're asking you is whether the original owners, rather the family of the original author of the Top Gun story back in 1983 still owns the copyright. Please go to Menti and you should see a screen that looks like this with yes, no, or it's complicated buttons. Please vote now. We'll be wrapping in 11 minutes from now. If you have any other questions, please add them here in Mentimeter, as we have from 2 of you. Thank you for this one. You write, what about films or TV projects based on public figures or public events? If you made a film, say, about the independence of Singapore, would you have to clear the rights with all the figures involved, Michael?
Yes, I think, well, yes and no. I think if it's public figures, I think so long as it's not, it's in the public domain, and you do not in any way libel the person, defame, I think it should be fine.
What do you base that on? Time or?
But of course, I mean, I think ideally, the reason why I say that is ideally you should get your releases, but sometimes getting releases are impossible. So there's a thin line to, how you do this.
You have proven that you've tried, perhaps.
Sorry?
You need to have proven that you've tried to get all the releases.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of them. That would help as a possible defense if you get sued, that you've tried all you could, but it was impossible to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, Mark, another issue that comes up on that one, and I guess what made me chuckle is, at some level, these films you want to distribute or put into a theater, they've got to go through some sort of a classification system, or what we might call censorship. And I know in Singapore, when I lived there, filmmakers had a lot of trouble getting certain works out into the public, because at the end of the day, the regulatory authorities certainly just didn't want certain things portrayed a certain way, or didn't like people, didn't like things being discussed. Let's say it that way. I'm trying to be diplomatic. So that's, I think, films about the independence of Singapore. I know there's been a lot of filmmakers that have tried to put out a number of things that haven't been successful.
Interesting. Thank you for both of your insights, and hopefully that's answered your question. Please keep the questions coming. We still have 9 minutes or so, and please vote on the question that's on your Menti now. Okay, here's the next one for you, Michael and Frank. Share 3 top considerations for creators to focus on when dealing with these OTT, the streaming studios. Michael.
I think the one is, what's the scope of rights that you'll be granting? I mean, that's important. And what rights you should or can reserve for yourself.
So these are rights like game show, or rather game development or theme park rights.
Yeah. I mean, well, theme park, I think I'm looking at maybe like, film, novelization, podcasts, yeah, I mean, things like that. Of course, theme parks, yes, if you can.
Okay. What's the second and the third?
Second and third.
Frank.
I think everybody's main concern is getting paid. And with a lot of these new markets, concerned about if they're going to be around tomorrow. If you embark and contract yourself to do something over a 3-year period, and these guys fail out, so that would be a concern. But my thoughts were immediately the same as Michael's. The extent of rights granted, which really then the second one is the extent to which derivative rights could be based on whatever it is you're doing for them.
What are derivative rights? Is that not the same as theme parks and game development?
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah. So, the creator always wants to limit the rights that are being granted. The producer always wants to acquire as much as they possibly can. And that's been the historical game.
And I think, Frank just said payment. I think that's probably one of the top issues as well. I mean, especially for independent creators. I mean, because I think sometimes, and don't quote me on this, I think sometimes the way the payment structures are with some of the streamers is that you might end up having to cash flow something, the production yourself before being paid, which could be an issue. So it's trying to get a place, coming to an agreement to a place where you can have sufficient funds for you to carry on in producing something for the streamers without being out of pocket.
Okay, wow, that's a lot of discussion. Earlier on at the beginning of this this webcast, Michael, you were saying that you were working against one of the streaming companies. Did you mean that quite so literally, or is it really the pitting of the creative against the studio when it comes to negotiating these rights?
I mean, I said it against in the sense that, you know, we were negotiating against them, really. So I was acting for the creators, and we're trying to document a deal with the streamers.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Well, I wish them. I wish you the very best with that. As we conclude, start to wrap up our conversation today. Here are the results of the poll. We asked you whether the family of the original author of the 1983 article Top Gun still has a claim over the Top Gun franchise, including the very popular Paramount movie, which has earned the studio $350 million. This is how you have voted. 4 of you say yes, they still have a claim, while also gets a Guernsey. You know, the studio, of course, says that they don't have any claim at all. They would be fighting the claim vigorously, but the lawyers of the family of Ehud Yoneh would obviously beg to differ. Michael, where do you come in on this discussion?
Oh, I think it's complicated.
Well, it's precisely the earlier point made, and it's a function of the U.S. Copyright Act.
Yeah.
Notwithstanding the fact that you might transfer the copyright for its entire lifetime, you also have a right to recapture 35 years after the transfer. And what this gentleman is alleging is that he informed Paramount at a certain point in time that they no longer had the rights, and that he exercised the rights that were given to him under the Copyright Act, and that they simply failed to reproach him back. You would have thought that the studio at some point would have done their checking and balances and re-signed it up. But this is the point of the concern. I think he's got a very good claim if he's basing it on the reversion and termination rights.
But we're also seeing an incredible amount of, you know, what might be called as quite frivolous claims, like the Mariah Carey claim. Did you see that the other day? That some guy wrote a song, "All I Want for Christmas Is You," and now he says Mariah Carey stole it. I mean,
yeah, this one's different. There's no doubt that the Top Gun movie was based on this gentleman's article. No doubt whatsoever.
In fact, got a credit in the original movie 20 or so years ago. But where do you draw the line where you say, okay, well, you know, now we're just getting into frivolous claims? Michael?
I don't know. I mean, to be honest, I mean, I think at the end of the day, this is probably like Frank said. I mean, in this situation, it really is a U.S. copyright issue. I mean, I don't think we have such a provision in Singapore or in Hong Kong, if I'm not wrong. I mean, so it really is. If that was the case, then, you know, Paramount should have actually really paid more attention in re-signing the rights, or getting the rights reassigned again. You know.
Looks like maybe the studio was the maverick in this case.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, Michael Leow in Hong Kong at Haldanes. Thank you very much for being our IP clinic specialist here on the PitchMark show today.
Thank you.
Great to have you with us. And Frank Rittman, also thank you for your contribution. Here on screen are details of our next IP clinic by PitchMark, Pitching Skills for Innovators, Friday the 8th of July at 5 p.m. Singapore, KL, Manila time. Please drop us a note here in Zoom chat if you'd like to join us, or be sure to sign up at pitchmark.net for a free account as an innovator. It's always for free, and that way you can also make sure you're on our mailing list and never miss an item. Michael Leow and Frank Rittman, thank you again, and thank you for watching. See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.